The Santa Ana winds move through the canyon like something with memory. They carry dust and jasmine, and the particular silence of a city that has never learned to sleep, but has learned to pretend. On a private estate in Bel Air, the kind of address that doesn't appear in directories, two black cars sit idle in a circular driveway. Their engines have been off for 40 minutes. The drivers do not speak to one another. They have been told not to. Inside, through glass doors that open onto a garden of birds of paradise, a single lamp burns orange in a study lined with books that have actually been read. The spines are cracked. The margins are marked. These are not decorations. These are weapons of a different kind. There are moments in history that no camera catches. No journalist files a story. No official record is kept. But the people in the room carry what happened for the rest of their lives. In the way they walk, in the way they fall silent when certain names are spoken, in the weight behind their eyes when they think no one is watching. This is one of those moments. What was said in that room on a February night in 1967 would never fully enter the public record. But its consequences, the ripple, the shockwave, the quiet revolution it set in motion, those consequences are written across the entire history of what it means to be the greatest at anything. Two men were about to sit across from each other. Both were the most dangerous thing alive in their respective worlds. Both had been told, their entire lives, that the other kind of power was lesser, that the other path was weaker, that the other man's genius did not count. Tonight, one of them would laugh, and that laugh would change everything. He had a name that shook stadiums. Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Marcellus Clay in Louisville, Kentucky, January 17, 1942, had by 1967 become something that had never existed before in American life. He was not merely a champion. He was a philosophy with fists, a theology with footwork. He had beaten Sonny Liston twice, once by knockout and once by making Liston feel, for the first time in his criminal life, genuinely afraid. He had unified the heavyweight championship of the world and then, without flinching, handed the United States government his draft card and told them he would not go to Vietnam, because no Vietnamese man had ever called him the word that white men in Louisville had called him since childhood. The boxing establishment hated him for his mouth. The government feared him for his conscience. Black America loved him for his refusal. And the world, the whole watching world, could not look away. In the ring, Ali operated on a principle that most fighters refuse to accept. That beauty was strategy. That grace was not the absence of danger, but its most advanced form. He did not stand flat-footed and trade. He moved. He circled. He made men reach for him and find nothing. He made powerful men feel foolish. And foolishness in the ring is the beginning of collapse. His reach was 78 inches. His reflexes had been measured, scientifically, as among the fastest ever recorded in a heavyweight. Trainer Angelo Dundee had watched him for years and still sometimes saw things in sparring sessions that made him set his clipboard down. Ali weighed, in fight condition, between 214 and 218 pounds. He was not the biggest heavyweight. He was not the hardest puncher. But he was, by every available measure, the fastest large human being who had ever lived. He knew it. He spoke of it constantly. He built his entire persona around it. Speed, he said, was the last democracy. Speed did not care about your size. Speed did not care about your lineage. And then someone told him about Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee, born Lee Jun Fan in San Francisco, November 27, 1940, raised in Hong Kong, returned to America at 18, was not yet the icon the world would later make him. In 1967, he was known in specific circles, martial arts circles, Hollywood's back corridors, where he had appeared on the Green Hornet as Kato and stolen every scene he was in without trying. A few gyms, a few closed-door demonstrations, but among those who had actually seen him move, seen him throw a punch in footage slowed to frame by frame. The conversation stopped being casual and became something closer to religious. He stood 5 feet 7 inches. He weighed, depending on the period, between 128 and 145 pounds. He had the body fat of a greyhound and the muscle density of something assembled in a laboratory. He had trained since childhood in Wing Chun under Ip Man, then systematically dismantled every martial arts tradition he had ever encountered, kept what worked, discarded what was performance, and built something he called Jeet Kune, the way of the intercepting fist. The philosophy of Jeet Kune was this: do not wait for the attack to arrive. Intercept it. Meet it before it fully forms. Destroy the idea of the punch before the punch becomes real. He had a standing 1-inch punch that could move a 200-pound man backwards 6 feet. He had a kick that kicked before you saw him begin to kick. His hands moved at speeds that high-speed film, which ran at 24 frames per second, sometimes failed to capture. He had said, publicly and privately, that speed beats power. That a man who could hit you before you could process the decision to hit him had already won. That strength was a consolation prize for people who had not bothered to learn something deeper. Someone in Ali's circle heard this, and they told Ali. And Ali, upon hearing it, laughed. The laughter was not mean. That is the important thing to understand. Ali's laughter was never mean. It was a challenge issued in joy. It was the laugh of a man who believed so completely in what he was that someone claiming to hold the same truth felt to him like a wonderful provocation. Word had gotten around. The way word gets around in the world of men who are the best at physical things and know it. Through managers, through gym conversations, through journalists who carried stories like currency. The story was this: Bruce Lee had said that a smaller, faster man could neutralize a larger, more powerful one. That mass without speed was just weight. That the heavyweight champion of the world, theoretically, could be stopped by a man who understood interception better than he understood blocking. The implication hung in the air, unspoken, but understood by everyone who heard it. Ali's people were not amused in the way Ali was amused. Herbert Muhammad, Ali's manager, sat in the study that February night with his hands folded on his knee and his expression carefully neutral. Beside him, a man named Bundini Brown, Drew Bundini Brown, who had coined float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and who understood Ali's psychology better than almost anyone alive, sat forward in his chair with the focused expression of a man who had heard something that required a response. The problem, Bundini said, to no one in particular, is not what this man said. The problem is who's starting to repeat it. He meant the press. He meant the gyms. He meant the slow accumulation of a counter-narrative. That Ali's speed, legendary as it was a heavyweight speed. Relative speed. Speed measured against other large men. And that a different category of speed existed, demonstrated in martial arts, in kung fu schools, in the back rooms of Los Angeles, where a young Chinese-American man was doing things with his body that the boxing world had no framework to explain. Herbert Muhammad said nothing for a long moment. Then, arrange the meeting. There were those in Ali's circle who counseled against it. A boxing trainer named Dick Sadler, who trained Sonny Liston and George Foreman, and who had forgotten more about the mechanics of violence than most men ever learned, sat in a corner of that study and shook his head slowly throughout the conversation. "You don't validate what you don't need to validate," Sadler said. "You meet with this man. You give him something. You give him recognition. And recognition, once you give it, you can't take back." Bundini disagreed. Bundini understood something Sadler didn't, or understood it differently. He understood that Ali was not just a fighter. Ali was a story the world was telling itself about what was possible. And stories require confrontation. Stories require the moment where two forces meet and something is decided. Muhammad doesn't lose by meeting someone, Bundini said. Muhammad loses by being afraid to. The word afraid landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Herbert Muhammad looked at Bundini, then at Sadler, then at the window, where the Santa Ana wind moved through the birds of paradise in the garden. "Set it up," he said finally. "Private. No press. No cameras. Just the room." Sadler stood, buttoned his jacket, and said nothing more. But before he reached the door, he turned back. "If this gets out, either version of it, however it goes, it becomes a story neither of them controls anymore." Herbert Muhammad acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Then it doesn't get out," he said. What Herbert Muhammad's people did not know, what they could not have known, was that Bruce Lee had been told about the laughter too. And unlike Ali, Bruce Lee did not laugh. He sat with it. He thought about it the way he thought about everything that challenged him. Not with anger, but with the focused, almost scientific attention of a man who treated reality as a system to be understood rather than a force to be resisted. Lee's closest confidant at that time was a man named Dan Inosanto, a Filipino-American martial artist who had trained under Lee, and who possessed the rare quality of being both exceptionally gifted and exceptionally honest. Inosanto would tell Lee things that others softened. "He's not dismissing you," Inosanto told him, the week after the laughter reached them. "He's categorizing you. He's put you in a box marked smaller arts, smaller world. He doesn't think the conversation applies to him." Lee said nothing for a moment. They were in Lee's home gym in Culver City, a room that smelled of iron and liniment and contained equipment that Lee had in several cases designed and built himself. A heavy bag hung at one end, a speed bag at the other. Against one wall, a wooden dummy, the Mook Jong, bore the marks of 10,000 repetitions. "The box," Lee finally said, "is the problem, not the laughter. The box." He meant that Ali had filed the question under the wrong category, had heard speed beats power, and filed it under the heading of a smaller man making claims about a bigger man's world. Had not heard the deeper question underneath it, which was not about size at all, but about the nature of movement itself, about whether the body, trained to its absolute limit through the right principles, operated under different rules than the body trained to its limit through conventional ones. "I want to meet him," Lee said. Inosanto looked at him carefully. "He's in a different position than you," Inosanto said. "He's the heavyweight champion of the world. He has nothing to gain." "He has everything to gain," Lee said. "He just doesn't know it yet." The meeting was arranged through channels that have never been fully documented. What is certain is that both men agreed. What is certain is that neither brought a large entourage. What is certain is that they met on a night when the Santa Ana winds were moving through Los Angeles with the restless energy of something that had traveled a long way and was not yet done. The room was not large. That was the first thing that registered. Two men of this magnitude required, in some essential way, a large room. But the room was not large. It was a study. There were books. There was one lamp burning orange. There were two chairs positioned across a low table, and on the table, nothing. No food, no drink, no props. Just the surface of the wood and the air above it. Ali entered first. He was 25 years old. He filled the doorway not with bulk, but with the particular quality of physical confidence that goes beyond fitness. The quality of a man who has been in situations of real danger and come out the other side so many times that danger has become a language he is fluent in. He looked at Lee and smiled. "It was genuine. They tell me," Ali said, settling into his chair with the unhurried ease of a man who has never in his life felt unwelcome anywhere, "that you think a little man can stop a big man." Lee sat down across from him. He was 26. He sat with his hands resting loose on his thighs, his posture neither stiff nor casual. It was the posture of a man in a state of absolute readiness that he wore so constantly it had become his resting position. His eyes were completely still. "I think," Lee said, "that speed is the conversation you and I are both having. I think we've reached the same place from different directions. Ali studied him. The smile remained but changed quality. Became more curious, less social. You see me move? Ali asked. I've studied footage of you, Lee said. You move unlike any heavyweight who has ever lived. You don't think like a heavyweight. You think like a middleweight trapped in a heavyweight's body. And you've built a style around that contradiction. A pause. That is the most intelligent thing, Ali said slowly, that anyone has said about me in a long time. And people say intelligent things about me constantly, because I surround myself with people who understand that I require it. Something shifted in the room. The formal tension, the territorial tension, had not disappeared, but it had been joined by something else. Recognition. The specific recognition of one kind of genius encountering another. Show me something, Ali said. Lee looked at him. Stand up, Lee said. Ali stood. 6'3", 215 pounds of the fastest heavyweight alive. Lee stood. 5'7", 138 pounds. Throw a jab, Lee said. At full speed. At my face. Ali looked at him for a long moment. Then, without any of the telegraphing that most fighters cannot suppress. No shoulder drop, no weight shift, no preparatory breath. He threw a jab. Fast. Genuinely fast. Heavyweight champion fast. Lee was not there. He had moved, not backward, not sideways in any conventional sense. He had moved into a position that made Ali's extended arm point at empty air, while Lee's face was 18 inches to the left of where Ali had aimed, and Lee's right hand was resting, with no pressure, against Ali's ribs. Total elapsed time, immeasurable by eye. Ali lowered his arm. He looked at his own extended fist. He looked at where Lee was standing. He did not laugh this time. Do that again, he said quietly. They stood there for 40 minutes. No witnesses. No cameras. Just two men in a room, testing the absolute outer limit of what the human body, trained to perfection through different philosophies, could do. Trading observations. Demonstrating principles. Each man showing the other something the other had not fully seen before. What was said during those 40 minutes was never recorded. But what came after it was. Ali sat back down. Lee sat across from him. The lamp burned orange. The wind moved outside. You're right, Ali said. Speed is the conversation. But you're also right, Lee said. Power changes the conversation. Speed without power is dance. Power without speed is hope. Ali was quiet for a moment. What is it with both? He asked. Lee looked at him. That, he said, is what neither of us has fully solved yet. In the months that followed that February night, something changed in both men. Not dramatically, not in ways that announce themselves, but in the way that real change happens, which is quietly, in private, and becomes visible only in retrospect. Ali began to speak differently about the body. Not about his body. He had always spoken about that, but about the philosophy of movement. About why he moved the way he moved. He had always done it, but now the explanation went deeper. He spoke in interviews about interception, about making the opponent commit before they were ready, about how the Real fight happened before the punch was thrown. These were not boxing concepts. These were concepts from a different tradition, quietly absorbed and translated into Ali's own language. He did not credit Bruce Lee. The meeting had been private, but those who knew both men heard the echo. Bruce Lee, for his part, began to speak publicly about the equivalence of arts, about how the vessel mattered less than the principles inside it. He had always believed this intellectually. After the meeting, it became something he spoke about with a different quality. The certainty of a man who had tested the idea against the hardest available evidence. He wrote in his notebooks. The Tao of Jeet Kune was still years from publication, but the notebooks existed. A line that those who study his work have puzzled over for decades. Met the butterfly. The sting is real. No one knew what it meant for a long time. In Harlem, in the gyms where Ali was a living god, young fighters began to encounter, circulating through the community in ways that are impossible to trace precisely, ideas about economy of movement that had not been there before. The idea that a punch thrown too hard was a punch that could be made to miss. That power surrendered to speed could become a weapon of its own kind. In the martial arts schools of Los Angeles, a parallel shift. Students of Lee's began to study footage of Ali in ways they had not before. Not to mock boxing, but to understand it. To find in his movement the confirmation of principles they thought belonged only to their tradition. Two worlds, previously certain of their own sufficiency, had discovered a shared edge. And at that shared edge, standing quietly, were two men who had laughed at each other, and then stopped laughing, and then started something that neither of them had a name for yet. Dan Inosanto spoke about it years later, carefully, without ever fully confirming what had happened. There are meetings, he said, that you can't explain the effect of, because the effect isn't in the meeting. It's in what both men carry out of the room. And what they carry, they pour into everything they do afterward. And everything they do afterward goes into the world. And the world is different. You just can't always point to why. 2026. 59 years later. The fighters who fill stadiums now. The champions, the martial arts icons, the men and women who have reimagined what the body is capable of. Most of them cannot tell you precisely where the ideas they train on came from. The principles are simply there. The way grammar is simply there inside a language. You use it without knowing its history. But if you trace it, if you follow the thread backward through the coaches and the coaches' coaches and the books and the notebooks and the film demonstrations and the private conversations that somehow became public knowledge without ever being officially shared, you eventually arrive at a room in Bel Air. February 1967. One lamp burning orange. Two chairs. A low table with nothing on it. Two men who were each the greatest in the world at their particular form of human danger, discovering that the other man's greatness was not a contradiction of their own, but a completion of it. Muhammad Ali went on to fight the rumble in the jungle. He went on to employ the rope-a-dope against George Foreman, a strategy that was, at its philosophical core, about patience over force, about conservation, about letting power exhaust itself. Those who have studied both men note that it is not boxing strategy. It is something older, something that sounds, if you let it, like interception, like Jeet Kune do translated into heavyweight terms. Bruce Lee went on to make films that showed the world a version of the human body it had not previously understood was available to it. He died in 1973, 32 years old. A tragedy that his tradition teaches should not be the thing you carry longest, because the man was never only the man. The man was the ideas, and ideas do not have a life expectancy. Ali died in 2016. He was 74. He had carried Parkinson's disease for 32 years with the same refusal to be diminished that he had carried everything else. With grace, with humor, with the absolute refusal to let the difficulty of his condition become the final story about who he was. At his funeral, they did not speak only of the fights. They spoke of what he stood for. They spoke of courage and sacrifice and the right use of extraordinary gifts. They spoke of a man who understood, at some deep level, that the fight in the ring had always been a metaphor for a larger fight. That the speed and the power and the movement were in service of something that had nothing to do with belts or records. That is the thing that the room in Bel Air understood that February night, even if neither man could have articulated it fully in the moment. Greatness is not threatened by other greatness. Greatness is completed by it. Power needs speed to know what it is. Speed needs power to know what it is. The butterfly needs the sting, and the sting needs the butterfly, and neither one alone is the whole truth of what it means to be the most dangerous, most beautiful, most human thing in the room. There is an old question in the tradition Bruce Lee came from. What is the sound of one hand clapping? It is not a trick. It is not nonsense. It is a question about incompleteness, about how the thing that seems sufficient by itself is, in the absence of its counterpart, not yet fully what it is. Two hands, two men, one room, one lamp burning orange while the Santa Ana winds move through the birds of paradise outside, carrying something forward into a future neither of them would live to fully see. But both of them, in that room, in that 40 minutes, helped make possible. Ollie laughed when he heard what Bruce Lee said. Then he stopped laughing, and the world quietly, without announcement, without press release, without a single camera rolling, became larger than it had been before. That is the only kind of victory that lasts.